Hey guys, Dan Williams from Range of Motion. Have you ever considered that thinking is a skill and how you think is a skill? Of course, we think of physical skills as skills that we can practice and learn and improve on, but sometimes we don't consider mental skills to be the same. And have you considered that you can change how you think to make yourself happier, to improve your mental health? So if we look at physical skills, something like a child, a toddler, a baby learning to walk for the first time, it's a skill that can be learned. Maybe you're learning some complex Olympic weightlifting movements as part of your exercise, and you understand that it's a skill that can be learned. Maybe you're a right hander and you want to practice throwing with your left hand. It's a skill that can be learned and a skill that can be developed. And the improvements that come with time, with this sort of long term deliberate practice of a skill, they come from lots of different places. But one of the places they come from is an improvement in our ability to transmit a signal down our nerves. Because, of course, a signal comes from our brain, it gets sent down a bunch of nerves and the connections between those nerves and tells a certain muscle to contract. And that all makes sense when we're talking about physical skills. But the same actually applies for mental skills. And this was a bit of a breakthrough for me when I realized personally that not only could I train physical skills, but I could train my mental skills. I could train the way that I think. And just like practicing something physical can make us really good at moving in a certain way, some sort of motor pattern that we are going through from a physical skill perspective, exactly the same thing can happen if we start to think in a certain way and we start to change the way we think. We can get better at thinking this way because our brain gets better at sending signals down certain nerves which are responsible for that thought pattern. And just like the pathways of those nerves will improve a physical skill, we can get better at thinking in certain ways too. So if you're someone who often has feelings of anxiety, not in a clinical, I have anxiety as a diagnosed type condition, but I have thoughts of anxiety, of stress as part of my daily life. The more you think those thoughts that make you feel anxious, the better you become at feeling anxious. You are effectively practicing an emotion or a state that is not preferable to you. Just like learning to throw with your left hand, you're practicing a skill that you're going to improve on as you go. Um, so maybe you're the sort of person who's very optimistic. You always see the bright side of things. You will get better at being more optimistic because you are strengthening those nerve pathways that make you look at the world in a positive way, that make you look at the world in a more optimistic way. Just like just like learning a new skill, just like a kid learning to ride a bike for the first time, it is really hard to change or to create a movement pattern that's not there. In a mental sense, it's very hard to create a thought pattern that's not already there. But just like learning to ride the bike, the more you do it, the easier it gets until riding a bike becomes an automatic thing that you just don't lose. And that's what we're trying to do with our mental skills as well. It's what we're trying to do with the ways that we think. How can you change the way you think? How can you change a thought pattern? And though it be very difficult initially, how will this improve over time, and how can you improve your ability to think in a certain way? So how can we use this? How can we use this newfound knowledge of the fact that yes, we can change our mental thought patterns? Let's say you're someone who's always complaining about the weather and it's either too hot or it's too cold or it's too rainy. Can you reframe this, and instead of complaining that it's raining, can you reframe this to look at the advantages or the good things about a rainy day, the puddles you can jump in with your kids, the puddles you can drive through as you're driving to work to make a big splash? How can you reframe this? How can you look at this and not judge it based purely on the negative? Maybe you're the sort of person who gets really frustrated as they're driving because people cut them off, and you're sort of verging on road rage and you're swearing at people even though they can't hear you. Maybe this is an opportunity for you to reframe this thought pattern and practice a bit of empathy. Maybe the person who's cut you off is rushing because they don't want to miss the birth of their first child in the hospital. So it's an opportunity for you to reframe something that is maybe a negative emotion, something that doesn't make you feel good, to a positive emotion, something that does improve your mental health and something that is ultimately going to make you happier. So Key takeaway, I guess, from this is that thinking is a skill. Thinking is something that we can get better at with practice. So what you should do, what we all should do, is practice thinking in the way that we would like to be thinking. Because if you practice that, you're further strengthening and establishing those nerve pathways. So you get better at thinking the way you want to think, and ultimately you end up being happier. Um, you always have a choice as to how you think. Thinking is something that you do and you control. It's not something that happens to you. And although sometimes we feel like thinking happens to us because we have a lot of emotional baggage and events in our past that have shaped the way we think, and we have a lot of these little mental models and shortcuts that our mind tries to take, ultimately you're in control of how you think. It's not easy at first, just like learning to ride a bike. It's not easy at first, but if you practice it, you can improve it. Thanks, guys. See you next time.